Hello you guys, and welcome back to the next video in the Journal Your Story series. And today's prompt is called Create Your Own Path. And so basically what I decided to do was I was going to do a layout page of some artwork of how I feel about creating my own path. And so actually I had kind of a thought in my mind of having a girl with a wand walking on a colorful rainbow path, wearing different kind of clothes, not different clothes that make her happy, and um, carrying her journal and some art supplies, and just kind of being in her element of happiness. So basically, I've already started my. Earlier, you saw that paper plate. I've already picked out my colors the um, for the artwork, which is my prime basic colors I use in almost everything: greens, blues, pinks, purples, yellows, and so I've got those ready. And then I also have white paint. And I took a class, or I actually was part of a club with Trisha Robinson. No, Trisha Robinson, and she really kind of taught how adding white paint to acrylic paint kind of that's what she does, and she uses a lot of paint to do her canvases. She's got beautiful work, and I'll actually leave her information below. But um, so I've really picked that up, especially like when I'm working with acrylics that can be so opaque. And by adding that white element to the paint, then you kind of start, how with watercolor, this is the way I view it, is with watercolor, you're able to like go darker, lighter, depending on adding the different kind of water. Well, that's what kind of the vision I see with when I use acrylic paint. It's sometimes you're using the acrylic paint, but it adds different different textures. Not necessarily different textures, but different coloring to your artwork. So as I mentioned, I wanted to have a girl that was carrying her journal, that had maybe a bag of or satchel or purse full of art supplies. And so I'm kind of like hoping I don't almost really uh, not wanting to put a hole in my paper by erasing. But yeah, so I'm just using a kind of a pencil that I like to use when I'm drawing. I think it's a Tombow pencil, and it's pretty light color, so that way you don't have to worry about when you go to paint on your projects, you're not seeing this really dark lead coming through. So that's one of the reasons why I like using this particular pencil so much. Yeah, you can see I was like, okay, it's time to just paint instead of trying to. A lot of times when I try to draw and it doesn't quite come out, I'll just start painting because um, with the paint, what I find is I can just, if I don't like it, I can just come back over it, let it dry, and come back over again with something else. So yeah, so that's kind of what my goal was here, was to just kind of let this painting evolve. Like I had this idea in my mind, but I wasn't really sure on how it was going to end up turning out. But I did have this idea of a girl wearing her fun, crazy clothes that she enjoys, and uh, just following her path to um, hope and love and new adventures. So yeah, I'm just kind of coloring in her pink dress, and that was one of the things. Like today, we were out and about, and I made a comment to my daughter about my outfit I was wearing, and I said, "Oh, look, I'm wearing all shabby chic today," and she's like, "Mom, I just can't go anywhere with you," or something, to like joking around. Like I said, "What do you mean?" She's like, "You're wearing pink and white striped socks," and so that is something I enjoy doing, is just kind of wearing my own style. And a lot of times I don't match, but I love to mix polka dots and plaids and colors and things like that. And so that's what brings me joy. And I think that is um, it's just who I am. So I've always kind of just worn not always, but right now, and I'm just want to dress exactly what makes me happy, and um, adding whimsy to every day no matter whether it's painting or journaling or what you're wearing. Um, that's creating your own path, and that's what I wanted to get down on paper and in my journal with this prompt. So yeah, so I'm just kind of going to go through the process of adding some stripes. I'm adding some stripes to their shirts. Right now I'm putting an orange shirt with, in fact, I'm wearing an orange shirt right now. You can see it kind of underneath the sweater there, but um, yeah, so I'm just kind of adding in. I'm not staying in the lines because I'm going to come back and do some pen work afterwards, and I'm just embracing just coloring and having fun. And if you're wanting to do this, but I hear a lot that oh, I can't even draw stick people or something like that. I know it sounds like my mom, but if if you don't feel comfortable drawing, I also thought about creating pages like a collage of things that you enjoy. You could use magazines, you could use newspapers, you could use ephemera, stickers, actually, like just use markers. Anything that you enjoy and love and what you like to have in your life, to me that is creating your own path, because it's being who you are. And so you could do like a collage page. You could even write a bullet list of different things, that ways to creating your own path. And so there's a lot of options you can do with this prompt. And so it's really kind of fun to um, to kind of come up with an idea of what brings you happiness. And that was one of the things I wanted to see, her walking on a path of color and whimsy. And so that's kind of the idea that I got behind when I started thinking about this prompt and how I wanted it to be represented um, in my journal. So that's always an idea, to use different things that you have, or just start digging in your stash, and you can create a collage page. And actually, I'm thinking about doing a collage page for one of these prompts. I don't know yet which one, but I do think that's probably going to be something that I eventually, one of the things that I'll be doing in another video as part of this series. So, because I like that. That's kind of what I did um, for my vision board, is creating a collage, and it's just kind of fun to gather and glue and assemble different things without necessarily having a rhyme or reason to it. So yeah, so I'm just kind of coloring in using a paintbrush. And then what I normally do is also, once the paint starts drying towards the end, at the very, one of my last steps when I paint, is I kind of come through with some white paint and just add little highlights here and there. And so that's something to keep in mind too, that as you're painting, I work in layers, so I always like to get my first layer down and then come through, and you can always add um, different layers, and that's going to bring it more of a dimension look as well. So for example, with your flowers in her hair, I come back and do some pin work in there at the very end to really kind of define that flower as well. So that's just something to keep in mind when you are painting. um, I just I like to do my stuff in layers, and I think if you've painted a while, um, it really does, because a lot of times if you paint, I know when I first started out um, painting, I was like, oh, it just doesn't look. But then the more I spent more time on it, the more I let things dry, and I would come back and add different coloring. I would come back and add um, like different, like say for instance, I have a yellow flower, and I can come back in and put some white on top of that yellow, or if I have a yellow, or put some pink on there with a red center. It's just kind of makes those flowers look more dimensional on that end. So okay, so here I am working on her pathway, and I wanted it to be a rainbow, kind of candy themed rainbow color. I didn't want to go with more of the tradition. I wanted to do kind of the colors that I enjoy a lot of, and these are those um, pretty little candy colors, like pink, purples, blues, greens, yellows. And so, so yeah, so that's kind of what I decided to kind of create here. And I'm so glad that I was able to use my paint, because I was really worried as I started painting her. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have all this paint left over. So in the end, I ended up using quite a bit of my paint. So I was really, really happy that um, it all worked itself out, because I do not want to waste. I probably would have added it to another journal page or something like that. But oh, and then also a note, just a kind of a side note, that so the paint that I'm using is actually a craft paint. It's I use Americana and Folk Art. And then now for my white paint, I actually use Painter's Choice, which is a kind of a student grade, or more of a thicker, more high quality acrylic paint that you get in the art section at Hobby Lobby. I always buy it when it's 50% off because I use a lot of it. But um, now, what I've learned is the reason I like craft paint like this in my journaling is because sometimes with that heavier paint, like the artist paint, the Master's Choice, even though it's less expensive acrylic paint, I notice that it has a different consistency of like being thicker, shinier, taking longer to dry, and it makes my pages stick together. So, like for example, this particular page I will have to sit out overnight. Unlike if you just use straight craft paints that you can get like at Walmart and Hobby Lobby and all those places, they I don't have any problems typically with the pages sticking, and that dries fairly quickly. Probably because it's more of a not so thick and more water in it. So just kind of keep that in mind too when you're painting in your journals. For me, you don't have to use expensive paint. I just love um, to use what I have, but I like to use something that's not going to stick my pages together. So, um, and you might want to come back and do like a clear coating on it as well. But usually, what works for me is keeping it sitting out, letting the page dry overnight. So I wanted to, with my son here, one of the reasons I wanted to put my son is because I wanted to always talk about looking on the bright side, and I figure the sun is makes your path bright and let your light shine. And so I had thought about putting some eyes coming up, but then I changed my mind on that. So that was why I had added the white. Um, Started out the white, but when I mixed it in with that yellow, it actually created a more not so, again, opaque, stark white. I mean, stark yellow color. It lightened it up, and it kind of created some shading in there. So I really enjoyed. I mean, I'm really glad I eventually added some white to that. Now, here in just a minute, you're gonna see a kind of a page break because I was adding some watercolor to my page here, and I wanted to keep painting, but the acrylic paint was still very wet, and so I was having some issues. I didn't want the paint to start bleeding into one another. So I take a little short break here and make supper and come back and finish it up in just a minute. So you'll see kind of a break here. Okay, so I'm back after my break and making supper. And so yeah, so I decided to kind of use some watercolor in the background. One of the things about the watercolor on the gesso, it takes quite a while for it to absorb. And actually, you can see here that my colors start running together, but actually in the end, it turned out. I really like how this rainbow turned out. It's very non-traditional. I used yellow, pinks, and reds, and I had put some green in there, but it like, see how you can see it just started kind of running. So I just kind of set it aside for a minute, but in the end, I really, really like the way it turned out. It looks really good. And that's what's fun about painting and doing your thing in your journal. You get to just kind of play and experiment, and you don't have to worry about it not being perfect, I guess, so to speak, and just have fun. So I'm decided to kind of add some little hearts and flowers along my pathway here. I thought about actually putting some butterflies in here, which I did not, but um, and also I kept thinking about the little saying of, oh, I believe in what was it, rainbows, unicorns, and uh, butterflies, unicorn. I don't can't remember now, but um, rainbows, butterflies, and unicorns. That's it. And so a unicorn doesn't make it onto the page, but I could always add a sticker or something like that if I wanted to. So, or paint a unicorn on there. You can come back and keep adding to your painting. There's no rules. So yeah. So I'm just kind of coming in here and um, just adding a few bits and pieces here of some flowers and some hearts and filling um, in that rainbow. And then I kind of was like, she needs some flowers behind her, and you can see I have some little mushrooms there on her path too, because I love the whimsy of mushrooms, and it just reminds me of fairy tales too. And this kind of goes along with the my word too, is, and you can see the wand is, my word this year is fairy tale, so it kind of like brings that out as well. And I added a little balloon there because I thought, balloons are childlike and they're fun, and she's going to have it hanging from her bag, like tied onto her bag, and she's just she's just having fun and embracing her inner child and uh, heading down her path. So, so yeah, so I'm just kind of just filling it in, and one of the things that I like to do too is just kind of keep adding layers. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. I might have. Just keep adding layers to your artwork. That gives it dimension. And one of the things I also do at the very end here is I come back through and I add white to after everything is dry. I just kind of go through and add a little bit of white paint to everything just to kind of lighten it up, and that always helps as well. And my son over here needed some color, so I eventually add some orange and some darker yellow to my sun as well. And flowers just make everything better, don't you think? So speaking of, as I finish painting this up, for the rest of the prompts, I still have quite a few. I plan to have all of them done by the end of January. So that was kind of my January goal, was to I think there ended up being 20 prompts. And so yeah, so I'm going to be working on several more videos. This last couple of weeks ended up being a little more crazier. I don't have any idea, but it just went by so fast, and so I hope to pick it back up and finish these videos up before the end of the month for journaling your story. And actually, I was thinking there's so many other ways to keep going and journaling. You don't have to stop just because you run out of prompts. So it may be something that I come back and do stories here and there on different ways to journal your story. So yeah, so I came back in with some acrylic on that rainbow and just kind of defined it a little bit more, and adding blue here to fill in the background. And then of course I have to put in my prompt, which is creating your story. So I decided to kind of add it to the top left-hand corner there. And then I had this little piece of ribbon on my desk for quite a while. And so I saw it and I'm like, oh, it's bright color, and I'm just going to add it to um, the top of the page there. And it just kind of adds a little bit of whimsy to your page. I just use my Tim Holtz stapler to adhere that to the page. So yeah, so I'm coming in. I'm just adding more detail work. I'm gonna come in and do some pen work here in just a minute. Um, Getting her little face all set up. I love using watercolor for the cheeks. I don't know, it just seems like it gives it a little bit more. I think I like that particular color, that Illustrated Faith pink that comes in the classic colors. Just adding her some little eyelashes, adding some, giving the sun some eyes too as he's peeking over and ready to bring some sunshine to her day. And the pen that I use is actually let's see here if I have one. It's a pen that I use. I think I've talked about it in most of my videos, but it's a Micron, I believe, and it's .08 is the size, and I pretty much use it in all of my artwork. It's very now it isn't quite. I kind of like to wait till my art is almost pretty dry because if you add water anywhere near it, it will run, and so I just I do like to wait until the artwork, but to me, I love adding pen work. It just adds a little bit more detail to my artwork, and it defines it a little better as well. And really, what I really focus on here is just kind of outlining her to really have her pop off the page there. And it's not, um, it's just adding lines and texture to the page. So.